And God said, "Let there be
The
light."
Lord says, "Let my people go."
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
This is the Talkin' Bible podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talkin' Bible. Hello, Georgia.
Hello.
We're continuing our conversations on red letter Jesus, and we're finding some red letters of Jesus that aren't in the Gospels this time.
Absolutely.
This is one of the few times
Yep.
in the whole of the New Testament where we see red letters of Jesus speaking after his resurrection and ascension. So a little bit at the beginning of Acts when he talks to his disciples before he goes to heaven. This reference here to his conversation with Saul when Saul gets converted on the Damascus Road.
Yep.
And then a few times in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation when he talks as the risen, powerful Jesus. So this is the story of Saul's conversion.
Yes. Yeah.
Which has come across into modern vernacular. We say we've had a Damascus
So
Road
true.
experience.
So true.
It usually means a life-changing kind of pivotal moment, kind of epiphany experience.
There you
That's
go.
what it is. It's most people, you said, a Damascus Road experience, they wouldn't know what it means, but this is where it comes
Here
from.
It is.
Here
Yeah.
it is, right here.
That's good. That's great. So this guy named Saul, originally named Saul. Originally named Saul. Now,
Well, actually,
commonly known
that's
as
not
Paul.
technically true either. Saul is just his Greek
okay.
name.
Okay.
Paul or Paulos would have been his Greek name,
Okay.
and Saul would have been his Hebrew name,
Okay,
his Jewish
that
name.
makes sense.
And
Yep.
so he's referred to Saul. He's called Saul in this context when he's dealing with Jews, and then once he goes into the Gentile world, it's Paul or Paulos. Yeah,
Well, that's helpful.
he probably had both names depending on what context he was in.
Yeah. And he's traveling to Damascus to arrest followers of Jesus, basically.
Yes, yeah.
He's on his way.
He's on a mission.
He's on a mission.
Lock him up.
Yeah. And then along the road, however, how long would that road be?
Jerusalem to Damascus would be 4 or 5 days walk, I reckon.
Okay. Wow.
It'd be a significant distance.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably a couple of days from Galilee, and so it could be a week's journey. Yeah.
Okay. So he's on this road, and then a blinding light from heaven hits him. And Saul hears a voice that says, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And then the voice identifies itself as Jesus. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." And then Saul is blinded and led into to Damascus, where he fasts and prays for 3 days. And then this guy named Ananias.
Which one is it? Ananias or Ananias? This is Ananias, I think.
Ananias, yeah.
Yeah.
A disciple in Damascus is told by the Lord by a vision to go see Saul. And at this point, Ananias knows who
Saul is.
Like, he's like,
You want me to do what?
hang on. This
Hang
is
on,
a
Lord.
wait what moment.
This is a wait what moment, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, hang on. I know who Saul is.
Yeah.
And
he's actually come here to arrest us.
Yeah.
You want me to go and front up to him?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
But he obeys.
Yeah.
And Ananias lays hands on Saul. And then something like scales falls from Saul's eyes. And his sight is
the confusing
restored.
thing scholars have argued about forever.
Absolutely. And
What
I'm going
was
to
that?
ask you
I
that
have
question.
no idea. I have no
love
idea what they mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's some history in Jewish belief at the time that there were some kind of things that would get on our like cataracts and stuff that they would get on their eyes, and it would cause them to be blinded, and I think that's what they believed was going on. From memory, I'm just stretching my memory now on what I've learned in the past. Or it's like they believed that they would not be able to see because they would get these growths on their eyes, but somehow that's what they thought fell off their eyes. But it still doesn't make any sense, really.
Yeah.
I
Do you
just don't know.
think potentially it was almost like they were trying to put a human or like
I wonder if it
an
was that.
understanding on it when it was really just a full spiritual experience?
Yeah, I think so. Because he's obviously become blind.
Yeah.
That's part of this thing. He's not been able to see as a result of this, but I assumed it's the blinding light or something that did that to him. I don't know. It could be. It would seem to indicate there's something. Luke seems to be indicating there's something significant happened here. Something physical happened to him. But I think scholars probably would be hard pressed to be able to pin it down and say this is definitively what it was.
Yeah. And why blindness? Why in the eye? Why?
Yeah, I think I think it would be, Paul links this later on in Ephesians to the eyes of our heart. I think there is a link it'd be in common thought as well as in Jewish thought, that there is some kind of link between the things we see and the things we are, the way we interact with the world. So we use light analogy. Enlighten me, for instance. So what is enlighten? We use the word enlighten me, but really it's not physical light going into us, but somehow we understand that we're becoming enlightened. Yeah. We're using light language to describe something that's happening emotionally or intellectually in our head. So I suspect it's something like that. Paul's probably thinks he's enlightened as he goes to Jerusalem. He knows what he's about as he goes to Damascus. He thinks he's in the light. Yeah. He thinks he's walking in the light. And Jesus shows up as the real light and blinds him and tries to reinforce to him, you thought you were in the light, but you're actually in darkness. That's probably my best guess as to what's going on. Yeah. And also dependency, I suppose. Once he was blind, he had to rely on those around him. His self-assured Paul on a mission, thinking he's doing the right thing, Saul, on a mission, full of himself, zealous for the God, trying to do the right thing, and end up just basically being guided into Jerusalem, into Damascus by these other guys. Talk about being humbled and being knocked off your pedestal. I think maybe that's part of it as well. Yeah.
And what I find so interesting about this story is that Jesus chooses Paul.
Yes.
He goes to him and he chooses to meet him on this road, and it's a significant. And then Paul goes on to an incredible ministry and does so many things. But it's just so interesting. Why did Jesus choose him?
Oh yeah, well that's right. Why of all people would he choose him?
Yeah.
So scholars have argued about or questioned why that might be. I think there's a few reasons. Ultimately, not to totally normalize it, but there's a few things that would have helped Saul to be able to be what God called him to be. Because he actually says to Ananias, he says, go and see him because I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. And I've called him to be a light to the Gentiles. There's that light language again. I've called him to go out to the Gentiles. So a few things. Saul is from Tarsus, which is up around the northern, just sort of the northeastern tip of the Mediterranean, and sort of in what is modern day Turkey. And it was had a lot of Jewish population there, but it was also a town that was Roman citizens. So he had he had numbers of advantages he needed. If he was going to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, the advantage that he was a Roman citizen helped, which we see a couple of times that he pulls the Roman citizen card. So that was helpful. He was, and we see it in his language, he was well-versed well trained in Judaism. In fact, he had studied under Gamaliel. Well, Gamaliel was like the chief teacher. Okay. He was like the university professor. If you were a student of Gamaliel, it wasn't because you were luck of the draw. Gamaliel chose you, and he chose the best students. So there was something that his parents had seen in him. He was obviously a very smart man. He was well trained in Jewish law, but also had the benefit of not growing up in a Jewish community. So he was also very well trained in Greek philosophy. Yep. He knew Plato, he knew Socrates, he knew Greek thought. And so because he has all of this thing, it's just all these things combined together to make this man a man who is very well educated in both Greek and Jewish thought, Eastern and Western thought, Roman citizen, all the things that Jesus would need for him to be able to be in order to spread the gospel. So that's part of it. He's also zealous for God. Yeah. Later on he'll describe this. He says, I was more zealous for God than most compatriots of my time. Yeah. He was just he was zealous. It wasn't his lack of, he wasn't ever going to be accused of being lukewarm. Yeah. Not Saul. I mean, he was full on for God, but he was full on deceived. Yeah. He thought he was doing the right thing. When he's rounding up Christians, when he's sitting there seeing Stephen martyred, he's convinced he's doing God's work. Yep. So he had a passion about him and a zealousness about him, and I reckon Jesus saw that in him and goes, you know what, I want that. Yep. I see that. I see you're trying to do the right thing. Now I need to knock you off your horse so you can see who I really am. Yeah. You realize you're persecuting the one you're supposed to be trying to serve. Yeah, and I highlighted that where he says, where Jesus is like, why are you persecuting me? Yes. As that. And I wonder if that was almost like the chord that struck Saul's heart. Was like, hang on, what am I doing? What am I doing? I reckon that is it. Yeah. It's like, I thought I was doing God's will and I'm actually kicking against God's will. Yeah. It shows me that we can be sincere and sincerely wrong. Yeah. And So that's a good sobering thought, that I can be convinced I'm doing the right thing but be doing the wrong thing. But it also shows me that Jesus doesn't write him off because of that. He saw something on this man. He said, I just need to redeem that, or I need to direct that and bring it back onto a path. And he clearly did. He blinded him and then brought him back to sight. The other thing, as you were saying, and I'll go back to your notes in a minute, I've never seen this before. It occurred to me. When Saul first begins his ministry, his Gentile ministry, he leaves Antioch. And the first place he jumps across to is the island of Cyprus, which is just off the coast. And he meets a man there. He gets talking to the governor of the island, the Roman governor. He gets talking to him. And this governor has another guy who is in his ear called Sergius Paulus. Same name, actually. And this guy is basically trying to poison the governor against Paul and Silas and saying, don't listen to him. He's got control. And Saul, he called Paul by that point. Paul says to him, you're a servant of the devil. You're going to be blind and unable to see for some time. And I've never thought about the link, but I wonder if Paul gets out there and goes, well, hey, all I know is I thought I could see once and I was made blind so I could see the truth. Maybe I need to do that to you. So he pronounced blindness over this guy, and this guy couldn't see. He had to be – it's like what happened to Paul, what happened to this man, which makes – I've never seen the link before, but maybe Paul was just trying it out and thinking, well, maybe this guy could come to the truth as well.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes you're right, we can be so sincerely wrong and we are so zealous and passionate about what we believe. And then it does take that moment of complete and utter, you are humbled.
Yep, that's right.
Before,
torn off your horse, thrown off your horse. Yes, that's right. I think so. Now, it's not that Jesus sets out to do that, but if we refuse, and he's going to get more passionate about winning us. Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes back to that, that desperation, when we talked about in the other yesterday's podcast, at this point. Saul wasn't desperate.
No.
He was just on a mission. He knew what he wanted to do. He was like, yep, I know it. I've got it. I don't need anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, but Jesus literally met him and made him desperate.
Yes.
Again. Made him in that place of complete.
Broke him right down again so he could build him back up again.
Yeah. Into a really and didn't discount the fact that he had all the knowledge, he had all the things, and all that was really good.
He still had to rework all that through the lens of Jesus. And N.T. Wright says from the time of him going to Damascus, there's about 14 years before his ministry begins.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And in that time, it's like he's back in his hometown in Tarsus, back making tents, and he's having to put Jesus into the center of everything he knew. All his learning and all that was all good, but it wasn't Christ-centered. So now he's having to figure out, that's what that means. This is how that works. That's what that prophecy was about. And so he had to learn about Jesus all over again. Yeah, which he did. He did, and ultimately became, the greatest evangelist the world has probably ever known, I would think. Yeah, we wouldn't have most of our New Testament. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the Apostle Paul.
Yeah. And why, what do you think the significance of having Ananias in the story is? Where does he come into play?
Okay.
Who's he?
Well, he's basically just a Christian man in Jerusalem. I heard a preacher say years ago, and this is what I think is going on, is Jesus always uses people to tell people about him.
Yeah.
So this is a significant moment. Saul has had this experience where he's spoken to Jesus, but Jesus is still wanting to use another person to complete the story.
Yeah.
So just prior to this, we have the story of Acts Acts chapter 10. What chapter are we in here? We're in 9. Acts chapter 9. So it's the next chapter, Acts chapter 10, immediately after this, where the centurion at Caesarea, he has a vision. Go and send for Simon Peter and get him to come. So the centurion sees an angel. The angel tells the centurion, go and get Peter and he'll preach the gospel to you. So I honestly think that it's just God's way of showing that he's always calling humans into partnership with him. He does it. He could do it on his own, but he always wants us to partner with him. So in this case, he says, I'm going to bring Ananias into this equation. Saul's not going to be a lone ranger out there, because Ananias is the one who's going to go and bring him and introduce him to the Christians there, and understandably they're going to be a bit nervous about it because what do you think? This is the guy who's come here to persecute us. So I think God's always using people to tell people about God.
Yeah.
I think that's probably as simple answer as I can get out of it.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Back in the beginning when he first hears the voice and he says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Saul replies, who are you, Lord? And I'm assuming that Saul has an understanding, like he's saying Lord to
yes, good question.
To him. And I'm assuming that he knows that something's going on. I mean, I would imagine something.
Yes.
He knows that, something divine is happening. But I wonder, why he's using that.
Why he's using the language Lord.
Yeah.
So the Greek word would be Adonai. No, that would be the Hebrew word. I don't know what the Greek word for Lord is. Not sure. Adonai is the Hebrew word. So it's a word that is used. It's actually, the word Lord appears in the Bible more than any other word other than the letter A.
Yeah.
So it's more than it's in there a lot. 7,000 times in the Bible, the word. Now it doesn't always refer to God in all different contexts. So I don't know whether or not he obviously realizes he's having some significant moment.
Yeah.
But is it an address at this point of Lord? I don't think it could be because he's not knowing who he's worshiping. So it's just obviously this one who he's confronted, he recognizes his absolute power.
Yeah.
I would suspect that's it. Is it an angel? Is he not sure?
Yeah.
But Lord would be a term of respect, I would imagine, in this situation. He knows that whoever this is significant, but I don't know who I'm facing. Because it's not until Jesus says, "Hey, it's me. I'm the one you're persecuting." So he wouldn't have known it was Jesus until he asked.
Yeah. Well, I just noticed the capitalization of the word. There is no capital there, but then later on when he says Lord. Yep. Okay. And once he knows that it's.
So I do notice there's a little L there. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe that's something to do.
So
with
the scholars will have intentionally written it that way.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily any capitalizations in the original text, so it's hard to know. But they will have made a decision there.
Yeah.
What version have you got? NLT, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the NLT is what I've got in front of me too. So if you look at other versions, it might be different. They would have made a translation decision, but they're trying to make that point of he's overwhelmed by this one, but he doesn't know who it is until Jesus reveals himself. Yeah. I would suspect that's what's going on.
Yeah. Once he regained his sight, he then got up and was baptized. Afterwards, he ate some food and regained his strength. I think that kind of shows the significance of baptism.
Oh, straight into it.
In his story, like in Paul's story, it's like, okay, well, like this is what comes next.
This is happening straight away in the story. Yep, that's right. And Luke was big on that. Yeah. He was big on showing that baptism was central, which we don't do enough of, I don't think. I think we need to teach on it better. We need to clarify it better. They understood what baptism was. Yeah. So there was they understood it in a bit more depth than we do. But it was obviously a pivotal moment for him. Yeah. Turning away from one way of life into another.
Yeah, and that is literally his story. It is from the persecutor to
to the persecuted. Yeah, he went from one to the other. I mean, before he even leaves the town, he's having to run away from the town out through the window because he's being persecuted. So he went full circle there, and it was an identification with a whole different way of life and with a different community of people. Yeah, baptism is as much about the community of people as it is about following Jesus. Yeah. So I'm not opposed to it. Occasionally you'll get people who'll say, could I be baptized in private? I try to avoid that because I think, you don't really fully understand what baptism is. Yeah. Yes, it's great that you want to follow Jesus, but it is significant. You're leaving one way of life and you're joining a new community. Yeah. And that comes into it too.
Public.
It's a public thing. It's supposed to be. So there needs to be something public about it, I think, in order for it to have the significance that it should have. Yeah. But I understand that that's, hard for some people because of anxiety or, all that sort of stuff. We can work with all that. But I think to understand that it is a public thing is important.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which you did. And the rest is history, as they say, when it comes to the Apostle Paul.
Yeah. Yep. He goes on to do some crazy things.
Yeah. Plants churches all over Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We are here today because of him.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else there?
No.
Okay. Yep. All right. Well, tomorrow we're going to talk about one of Jesus being anointed by one of these women.
Yes.
There's a few stories about this.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
That's tomorrow. Thanks for
Okay.
being with us, everyone. Talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.